Retro.
Yeah.
Electro. Tech.
Oh yeah.
Hey, turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Well, hello there once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electro Tech. And back on the bench is a Sansui Six, a receiver of which I did a preliminary evaluation video on some time back. But I had to shelve it for a while because I had a lot of work ahead of it. So anyways, as you can see, I'm back on it, and I'm not going to repeat everything that took place in the first video. So if you want to get the backstory and all that, and you know what has led up to today's video, then track it down. It's there. But anyways, in part, I'm doing a refurbishment of the power supply, the amplifier boards. I already went through and checked about as many solder joints and connections that I can realistically check with the time and budget I have to work with. In other words, I can't pull everything apart and examine every single solder joint and every strand of wire and all that. But certainly the areas that I'm working within and where connections and solder joints are visible, I go through with my magnifier light there and do the best that I can and try to inspect what I could. So again, here's the power supply board dangling about. I'm going to zoom in on that in just a moment and kind of give you the lay of the land, what I've done. And when I get to the amplifier boards, the same thing. I am going to be doing a deep servicing of the controls. I may or may not roll very much video footage on that because that's very routine. I do it all the time. I know that can get a bit boring. I might roll a little bit for the newer folks tuning in for the first time, but other than that, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I got to get moving and grooving on this, get it done. So let me go ahead and zoom in on what I'm doing right now and get to it. Okay, so here's our power supply board dangling in all of its glory, all of the leads sticking out, and there's a lot of electrolytics on this board. I don't know if you can gauge that, but yeah, a lot of electrolytics I had to pull, and so that's good. New electrolytics on the board. I'm going to get them all soldered in just a moment here. But yeah, everything's looking good so far. And a few things that I want to mention, and some of it is going to be controversial to some, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a moment. But yeah, this was a tougher board to work on because of the angle. There's a lot of wires that connect this board, so if you wanted to remove this board entirely, you'd have to desolder a lot of wiring, and they're not on posts. They're not wire wrapped, so you'd have to desolder them all and mark all the wiring and all that. I didn't want to do that. I had enough room to work with, even though it was a little bit of an inconvenience when you get further in, and the fact it was also made harder by the fact that these leads are folded over and against the board, of course, and some of them more so than others. Like some of the leads that are folded over, there's a little bit of gap between the pad and the board. Some of them, they're pushed right against the board. So the ones that are pushed against the board are kind of a pain in the butt because you have to be careful, obviously, when you're prying folded leads off of a pad, that you don't lift the pad and screw it up and all that stuff. So yeah, there's that. And the part that I'm referring to that's probably going to be controversial, and some people say, oh, freak out because of whatever reason, which is fine, is a lot of times when I'm in there with a desoldering gun, I will use the tip, the hollow of the tip there, and slide it under the lead a little bit and lift it up. And the reason why I want to do that is because of the fact that, well, the desoldering iron is hot and it keeps the solder melted, so that I can carefully lift the lead off the pad just enough, and very carefully, so that I can get under it with, a a pair of clippers and lift it the rest of the way, and then if I have to evacuate a little bit more solder off the pad, then I'll get my desoldering gun right on there, straight on, and you know, suck away until the cows come home. So there you go. There's textbook and there's reality. And the reality is sometimes it's just easier than getting the soldering iron and holding the tip on there and getting a little screwdriver, and you know, you got the tip of the soldering iron slightly in the way and you're trying to maintain the pad, you know, the solder on the pad. You're trying to keep it melted while you're sticking another little pry tool in there, and or solder wick or whatever, and trying to get it super clean so you can carefully pry up the lead. That just takes too long for me, because, you know, not to toot my horn, but I'm a coordinated person. I have a steady hand. You know, thankfully I've always been pretty coordinated. I don't do real foolish things and, you know, scrape across the board and do all kinds of hazardous stuff. I just very carefully, you know, get under there and just kind of lift it up just enough, and then pry it up the rest of the way, finish evacuating the solder if I have to, and all that. You get the point. And yes, sometimes, you know, the lead is going to scrape up your tip a little bit, just a little bit, but nothing to freak out about. And like I said, you know, that's why I'm in business, to, you know, make money so that I can, you know, buy another tip if I have to, and it pays for itself is what I'm saying. So I just wanted to throw that out to some of the newer guys. You decide if that's something you want to do. Some people say, oh, don't do it, you'll damage your soldering iron tip and all that. And yes, if you're too rough and you're, you know, slipping off of the lead and you're scraping your tip and gouging it and all that, yes, you will damage the tip. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But if you're careful with it and you know how to do it and you practice enough with that method, it'll work. And it's a lot quicker than messing around with all kinds of other crap, since you already have the desoldering gun and the hollow tip there. Just kind of lift it carefully and you're done in business. There you go. So there's that. So anyways, let me reposition the camera and get under here a little bit. Okay, so here we are looking at the main filters that I replaced, and they're considerably smaller than the original 4700 mic 50 volt caps that were in there. So as such, when you're dealing with the smaller diameter, you have to take up the slack and fill out the circumference a bit. So a lot of people will use weather stripping, the, you know, adhesive weather stripping. That's fine. I'll use whatever I have on hand that looks decent, that will do the job. In this case, I have rolls of that black Gorilla Tape. I like that because, you know, you could tear it down its length and get it right to the you know, the width that you want it, depending on the size of the cap, of course. And so that's what I did. I just tore some long strips and, you know, carefully wrapped them around the cap till I got the circumference where I wanted it, so that these things would mount into the clamp, just so. And there you go. More than one way to skin a cat, as I often say. You can use whatever. I've used you know, I have rolls of neoprene and stuff like that. I've used that before, wrapped it in, you know, neoprene, and yeah, same type of thing. The weather stripping concept, you know, whatever. I don't want to get too technical about it, but you're just trying to fill some space, and of course you want it to look halfway decent. And there you go. So, and on the note of installing caps, you can see I have the caps all dangling here, and, you know, like I said a moment ago, I have to solder them in and whatnot. But anyways, in regard to that, while I'm on that topic, when I'm doing a shotgun recap and I'm not hunting down a failed component, I'm not hunting down a specific problem, then I'll use a tester, just a quick down and dirty tester like this, just to check, pass or fail what I'm installing. I don't care about what's coming out during a shotgun recap, you know, just pulling out old caps, not hunting down a specific problem, but certainly whatever I put in that I'm installing, I do that just in case there's a dud in the mix. I would hate to install a dud and find out later that, yeah, you know, there's a bad cap. That doesn't happen very often. That's pretty rare to you know, run across a bad cap that you're installing, you know, a new one. But hey, let's face it, there are quality control issues sometimes, and, you know, it's good to check that, you know, pass, fail, with something like this before you install whatever you're going to install. So there's that. Otherwise, let me go ahead and flip it around, and I'm going to get this all soldered in first and all that, then I'll flip it around and show what's going on the other side of those main filters. Okay, everything's soldered in, and it doesn't look like there was a hack with a Fisher-Price soldering iron that did the work. Everything is nice and neat the way it should be done. And yes, there are a few holes, some of you might notice, that were not populated in the first place, so I didn't forget to do something. So there you go. But anyways, let me go ahead and get this board mounted back in place. Okay, and here's the power supply board all reinstalled. That's what's populating the top side of it now. Nice new caps. So let me go ahead and move on. Alright, so here we are at the bottom side. We're looking at the bottom of the main filters. And what I ended up having to do in this situation here, and I'll explain why, is I mounted all this wiring here that was originally mounted to the terminals of these original caps. I mounted them to the terminal strip, mounted to the chassis, and then routed my wiring from there to the terminals of these new caps. Because of the limited room that I had on these particular terminals, so a lot of times when you're searching for a particular cap, let's say a certain brand, a certain series, with certain specs or parameters that are best suited for the application, a lot of times your playing field is going to get narrowed down quite a bit, especially nowadays. Electrolytics, well, the selection isn't what it used to be, especially when you start getting into main filters and all that. And anyways, this is what I ended up with, these snap-in terminals, which are really for a circuit board mounting. But not that you can't use them, it's just that you have limited space on them. So yeah, that's just the way it is. And so that's what you find more commonly now, is the snap-ins and sometimes the screw terminals and all that. But again, it depends on what you're looking for. So I ended up with these Nichicon caps, with the parameters I was looking for, suited for a power supply, a good high quality power supply cap with good ESR and ripple current handling characteristics, a good higher temp rating, 105C, a long hour cap. So a good quality cap overall. But once I narrowed in on the parameters I was looking for, the brand and the series and all that, then again the playing field got pretty narrow, and this is what I ended up with. I knew I could make it work, but whatever. So yeah, I would have liked to have had something that had bigger terminals that I would have been able to route all this wiring to, and avoid the terminal strip and all that. But a terminal strip is just fine. Connections are nice and secure, soldered in place, and that gave me room on the on the leads here for what I needed. The few wires that I did need to route to them, plus the caps and resistors. So, and on that note, in regard to the .047 mic caps and the resistors that are connected across the leads here in parallel, well, these act primarily as kind of a snubber circuit for noise suppression. So simply put, the combo will help to filter out the higher frequency stuff, the noise that might show up in the circuit otherwise. And in addition to that, the resistors act as bleeders to gradually discharge the caps. So there's a few things going on with that, but I just thought I would mention why the why the caps and resistors are there, and also too why I routed the wiring the way I did, and terminal strip and all that stuff. So again, my selection was limited. These were the leads that I had to work with, and there you go. All right, and then there's these two 1000 mic 50 volt caps mounted neatly on a tie strip, which is of course mounted to the chassis, done very neatly. These here replace these, and I didn't want to deal with trying to resize them, wrap material around them to get them to mount in these two positions here into these brackets. No need for that. These are perfectly fine right here. So yeah, otherwise everything's looking good. Let me go ahead and move on. Okay, so I only have a few more things to do on this. I'm in the home stretch. So in probably a few more days or so. It's what, Friday right now, so after the weekend, because I have to take off for the weekend. I was going to work on this over the weekend, but I've got to be somewhere. But anyways, moral of the story is, after I get back, then I only have a few more days of, you know, getting this thing wrapped up. That's including testing and running it in the shop for a while and all that. So these boards here, I already went through and tolerance checked these boards. These are the amplifier boards or cards or whatever. And I tolerance checked all the resistors. Everything was looking good there. Junction tested transistors. Everything was okay there. And, you know, checked diodes out. Yeah, everything is looking good as far as in-circuit spot testing goes. So I only have 6 capacitors in total to change out. That's going to fly by like that when I get back. So, and then of course while I'm doing that, I will, you know, check out all the solder joints in a little bit more detail, make sure they're all sound, they're all good, and then that's that. The only other thing is, oh yeah, and as far as transistors go, as far as I know, I'm not a walking transistor encyclopedia, but as far as I know, all of the transistors on board are not of the variety that are known to be problematic. Although, on that note there, transistors don't necessarily have to be on the poop list in order to become electrically leaky, get noisy, or just, you know, fail altogether. So, you know, I don't put a lot of stock in that, yeah, it's great, you know, if transistors happen to be on the known poop list, then yeah, that's great, you know, change them out, do whatever. But the fact that this equipment is, you know, old, you know, late 40s, you know, 50s, and all that stuff, it's anybody's guess. It's old equipment, old components. A transistor or any part doesn't have to be on a list in order to fail. So, but again, I brought that up because, you know, as far as I know, these transistors are looking pretty good, and they're not of the variety that I'm aware of, that I can recall, that are of the, you know, failure-prone variety. And I'm not going to go and, you know, look up every, you know, jot down all the numbers on these transistors and go looking around on the internet and all that stuff. So, you know, ain't got time for that. So the only other things that I have to do is the controls. I haven't done the controls yet, but, you know, I have open access to all these controls back here. That's going to go by pretty quick, although you can't really rush that. You know, I've got to do my due diligence and flush them and work them and work them and work them, and that just takes time. Now, all of the push button switches above these controls here on the top side, and I think I mentioned that in the first video, that there's a hatch on the top. And the fact that these switches, these push button switches, are of the variety that the backs are open, so that I can, you know, inject contact cleaner without it, you know, being hindered. Being that that's the case, that's going to go pretty quick too. Once I get that hatch lifted on the top and get the right applicator on the can of contact cleaner and really start blasting out the switches and working them and clicking them and clickety clickety click, then yeah, everything's gonna go pretty fast. But that's the most time-consuming thing that I have left, because I do have to take my time with that and do my due diligence and really go over and over and over again on these controls, as I always explain. But other than that, once I get that done and get the amp boards installed, then this thing is ready for testing and pretty much ready to go. And I'm sure it's going to do fine. Oh, the only other thing that I am going to check out is the relay. The contacts seem to look okay. Now, I haven't pulled them out yet, but at the very least, I am going to pop the cover, check that out, and clean the contacts on the relay. If for some reason they turn out to be really badly pitted, which I don't think is the case, well then yeah, if the relay needs to be replaced, I'll replace it. If it does, it's going to delay things, but I think the relay is good enough, just, you know, cleaning it up and good to go. So that's the only other thing, the controls, the relay, and these boards. So that's going to go pretty fast once I'm back in from my weekend things that I have to do. So that's about it, guys. I'm going to go ahead and leave it here. There is going to be one more video when I get everything back in and I go into testing and do some audio testing. So there's going to be one more fairly short video. So anyways, guys, I'm going to leave it here. As I always say, peace, love, music, and the vintage audio that brings it to your ears. Till next time, y'all take care.
This has been a Spinning Head production.